When we think about intimacy, we tend to think in pretty straightforward terms. But there's a whole other world of sensation and connection out there, and that's what oral sex is all about.
It's definitely more than just a physical act, right? It's like a whole landscape with so much depth to explore.
Exactly. And that's what's so great about what we're looking at today. You gave us oral sex for everybody giving and receiving for men and women. And it's not just skimming the surface, is it? It's like a deep dive into all the nuances of pleasure for, well, everybody.
A deep dive is a great way to put it. It's really comprehensive.
Yeah, it covers everything from really tuning into your senses to specific techniques, some really fascinating historical context, and even, get this, how the layout of your bedroom can actually play a role.
That's one of the things that really jumped out at me, the whole environmental aspect of it.
Right. So our goal is to unpack all of this, pull out the most interesting and, let's be honest, useful bits just for you.
Think of us as your guides through all this information, highlighting what really matters, clarifying anything that seems a bit overwhelming, and hopefully empowering you to feel more knowledgeable and confident in this area.
Okay, so let's jump in. Right off the bat, the book really emphasizes setting the right atmosphere. Like, it's not just about the act itself, but the whole environment you create.
Yeah, and it makes this really interesting point about engaging all five senses. Like it goes way beyond just the physical touch. It's about creating this whole sensual experience.
Yes, it talks a lot about decor, even suggesting specific scents like sandalwood, cinnamon candles, all those sort of warm, inviting smells. It even mentioned things like basil and sage essential oils. It's
Yeah.
like you're crafting this mood, this ambiance.
It is. It's very intentional. And of course, you have the visual stuff too, lingerie, how the light's hitting things.
And then there's this whole tie-in with feng shui, which I found fascinating. The idea that the elements in your home earth, water, fire, metal, wood, can actually influence the sexual energy.
Right. They suggest things like softer yellow and brown tones to create a feeling of stability and intimacy.
And then, of course, you have those reds and oranges for passion. But it even goes into things like the placement of your bed in the room,
Yeah.
like where it is in relation to the door.
It's all about feeling secure and connected, right?
Exactly. And it all comes back to intentionality. But let's actually break down the senses themselves because there's a lot there. Smell, for example, it talks about pheromones, those almost undetectable body scents that can be such a turn on.
It's almost primal, isn't it?
It is. But then it also talks about more overt scents like perfumes, room fragrances, things like that, suggesting, citrus blossoms or even musk.
And that's where it gets really personal, right? Because what one person finds alluring, another might be completely indifferent to or even dislike. But pheromones, those are fascinating. The book mentions how they're thought to play a role in attraction by, like, directly affecting parts of the brain.
So maybe sticking with your natural scent, as long as you're clean, of course, might actually be better than trying to cover it up completely. If you want to attract a compatible partner, that is.
Exactly. It's about subtly enhancing what's already there. Now, what about sound? Had you ever really considered how quiet sex can be? Well, kind of boring.
Honestly, not really.
Yeah.
But the book makes a really good point about how those little sounds, moans, whispers, even just a playful instruction can be a huge turn on for both people.
It's immediate feedback, isn't it? It really adds to that feeling of connection and shared pleasure. It's about expressing your desire and enjoyment, letting go.
For sure. Then you have sight. The book talks about actually turning on the lights, looking at each other, appreciating your partner's body.
It's about getting past any insecurities you might have and really being present in that moment, seeing and being seen.
And then, of course, lingerie comes into play as well, adding to that whole visual element.
Absolutely. The visual just allows for a deeper appreciation of your partner and how they're responding, and it can really build that anticipation.
Okay, so touch, obviously, this is huge. The book goes into all these different ways you can caress, from fingertips to feet, even using things like satin or silk sheets to heighten the sensations.
And it really breaks down sensual massage, starting with those light circular motions on the back, which can be incredibly relaxing, and then working towards more focused attention on sensitive areas like the back of the head, the temples.
Yeah, and it suggests moving from the extremities inwards toward the genitals to kind of slowly build arousal. Then there's this whole concept of tantric massage for couples, which sounds so intimate.
Oh, yeah. Things like anointing the feet as a symbolic gesture, a journey to the privates, even kissing the chakras, which I have to admit sounds a bit out there.
It does. But the whole point is to be super mindful and connected, focusing on energy and heightened awareness between partners. And then, last but not least, taste.
Ah, Yes.
licking, sucking, really exploring your partner with your mouth. It even talks about adding edibles like honey or chocolate to add another layer of sensation.
Talk about a sensory experience, right?
Right. And it lists a bunch of foods that are considered aphrodisiacs, but it also wisely cautions against going overboard with alcohol.
Yeah, which makes sense because it can actually dull your senses, which kind of defeats the purpose.
Okay, so we've set the stage. We're engaging all our senses. And now let's get into the actual techniques, specifically for him versus her, because the book does make some distinctions.
And it's an important distinction because while ultimately the goal is mutual pleasure, the way to get there can be quite different depending on, well, basic anatomy and what people generally prefer.
So for him, the book highlights gentle fondling of the testicles, stroking the shaft, varying the pressure, and this is key, really focusing on arousal before ejaculation.
It's all about the buildup.
Right. And it also mentions the perineum, that area between the anus and scrotum, as a potentially sensitive spot.
Which, a lot of people might not even realize. Now, when it comes to pleasuring her, the book gets really specific, like avoid using oil directly on the vulva, use a warmed, water-based lubricant instead, and then start with just gentle caressing of the thighs and the outer vulva. Then it talks about lightly stimulating the labia majora, using the tongue on the nipples. And this is where it gets interesting. Careful, often indirect, stimulation of the clitoral hood and the surrounding area. It also mentions that for some women, the perineum and even the anus can be erogenous zones.
So many things to consider. It
Fascinating.
really highlights how sensitive that whole area is.
It does. It stresses that for a lot of women, direct, forceful stimulation can be too much, especially at the beginning. It's all about finding that rhythm, that consistent touch that builds pleasure gradually.
And beyond just the genitals, the book gives this whole list of erogenous zones for both sexes.
Right, it's not just about one specific area, right?
Right.
It's about the whole body.
We're talking skin, hair, lips. Apparently the upper lip is especially sensitive. And then the neck, ears, back, even places you might not think about, like the ankles and feet.
Which just goes to show that everyone's different, and that's why communication is so key.
100%. The book even touches on using teeth, love bites. And it mentions the Kama Sutra, using these really evocative names like the bite of the boar or coral in the jewel.
Which, let's be real, adds a little intensity, a bit of a playful edge. But it's definitely something that needs to be mutually enjoyed, and you gotta be gentle. No one wants to end up actually hurt.
All right, so we're feeling all sensual. We've got some techniques. But what's actually happening in our bodies when we experience pleasure? Thankfully, the book dives into the science of it all.
Which is really cool because it takes some of the mystery out of it and helps you understand what's going on.
Right. And it starts with something as simple as kissing. Apparently, a good, passionate kiss can release dopamine, testosterone, adrenaline, noradrenaline, and oxytocin. It's like a whole cocktail of happy chemicals.
It is. Kissing is way more than just lips meeting. It triggers all these responses in your brain and body, creating feelings of pleasure, desire, and even bonding.
It goes on to explain those 4 stages of sexual response for both women and men: excitation, plateau, orgasm, and resolution. For women, it talks about lubrication, the vagina expanding, the clitoris becoming erect and then retracting, and then, of course, those rhythmic contractions during orgasm. It even mentions the possibility of female ejaculation.
Understanding those stages can be really helpful for both partners. It's like having a roadmap, knowing what changes are happening and what to expect, and it just highlights how complex the female sexual response really is. It's not just one thing, it's a whole process.
And then for men, you have the penis becoming erect, the testicles elevating, that feeling that ejaculation's coming, the actual emission of semen, and then that refractory period afterwards.
Again, knowing the different stages can help create a more in sync and satisfying experience for both people. And that refractory period, that's important to understand because it helps manage expectations, after orgasm.
The book really emphasizes the importance of the PC muscle. That's the pubococcygeus muscle for both sexes. It explains how to find it and even suggests doing Kegel exercises to strengthen it.
Yeah, the PC muscle is super important for sexual function and pleasure. And the great thing about Kegels is they're so easy to do, and they can really make a difference.
Apparently, they can lead to stronger orgasms, help men control ejaculation, even improve erections. It's like a win-win.
Absolutely. Then there's a whole discussion about the different types of female orgasms like clitoral, uterine, and what people call the G-spot orgasm. And of course, it addresses the whole debate around the G-spot itself, where it is, how to stimulate it, even the whole thing about female ejaculation.
There's also mention of other lesser-known spots like the A spot, K spot, and U spot. It sounds like a whole new alphabet of pleasure.
There's definitely still a lot of research happening in that area, and everyone's different. But the book does a good job of outlining what we know so far, and it also covers the male G spot, which is the prostate.
Which can be stimulated, through the anus. Now, how about keeping things fresh?
That's important.
It is. And the book talks about this idea of an oral Kama Sutra, basically using your imagination and trying new things. It even talks about those classic categories from the Kama Sutra based on physical characteristics. Like the deer woman, the mare woman, those sorts of descriptions.
I have to admit, I got a chuckle out of some of those. But it's a fun way to think about different approaches and keep things interesting.
It is. And then it gives specific positions for cunnilingus, like the classic position, on top of her, and tips on how to effectively please both men and women orally in different ways.
Basically giving you practical ways to mix things up a bit and explore different angles and levels of intimacy.
Totally. It also encourages breaking out of the bedroom routine, suggesting things like a hotel getaway, borrowing a friend's apartment with permission, of course.
Or even a weekend trip. A change of scenery can do wonders for a relationship, and that can definitely spill over into the sexual aspect.
For sure. The book even mentions incorporating sex toys to add new sensations. And it briefly touches on the potential thrill of public sex, and also some historical and current views on what's considered prohibited.
Which is interesting because it gets into the whole psychological aspect of risk and breaking taboos, which some people find exciting.
But of course, safety first. The book has a whole section on safe practices and hygiene, emphasizing condoms, including flavored and female condoms, and the advice against swallowing semen from someone you don't know well.
It's all about being responsible, protecting yourself and your partner.
Absolutely. And then it moves on to kissing, which I found really interesting.
I loved that part.
It explores all these different types of kisses, from the 4 kisses in one to the simple Eskimo kiss, even the sour kiss, which I'm not quite sure I understand.
Me neither, but it's fun, isn't it? It shows how much variety there is and how you can connect in so many ways just through kissing.
And it lists some surprising health benefits, like reducing stress, boosting your immune system, even improving oral health, and toning your facial muscles.
So basically, kissing is good for you in more ways than one.
Exactly. Then it gets real and addresses some common concerns people might have, like the taste, smell, color of genitals, and fluids.
Which, let's be honest, people don't always talk about, but they think about.
Totally. And it offers suggestions like shared baths, edible lubricants.
Which is a great idea. It also advises against being too rough during fellatio to avoid that gag reflex, and it talks about the whole swallowing question, which is a personal choice, of course.
It gives some info about how diet can affect taste and even mentions the nutritional content of semen, which I have to admit I was not expecting.
It is a bit surprising, but it's all about being informed, right? Okay, lastly, the book touches on some more adventurous stuff, things some people might want to explore.
Like naughty phone sex.
Yeah, and even deep throat, which it explains actually comes from a film. It also mentions incorporating things like ice cubes, playful pinching, even waxing, but it warns about safety and using the right kind of wax.
It also mentions multiple partner oral sex, emphasizing communication and consent. And then there's a quick nod to sensual piercings and oral tantra, which sounds pretty intense.
It does, but I think the takeaway here is that there's a whole world of possibilities as long as everything is safe, consensual, and enjoyable for everyone involved.
So, wow, we covered a lot. It's clear that oral sex is so much more than just a physical act. It's this multi-layered experience that can be incredibly pleasurable.
It's about knowledge, communication, and being open to exploring different things with your partner.
And for you listening, we hope this has given you some insights, maybe some new things to think about and discuss with your partner.
Remember, this is about personal discovery, connection, and deepening your intimacy.
And maybe the biggest takeaway is that the most important technique is open communication and that shared sense of curiosity. So what will you explore next?
That's a great question to ponder.
Until our next deep dive, take care.